All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and we've got an amazing episode for you today. We are talking about COMO. We've talked about FOMO, we've talked about FOPO, but now we're talking about COMO. Ben, what even is that?
Well, I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to listen to the show, Bryce, but we are going to give you 8 different ideas of how you can use COMO to your advantage.
Mate, you've got to work this out, folks. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to 2 of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance, and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And Ben, welcome back to you to literally what is the couch.
Great to be on the couch. Great to be another framework today. We're going to have a little explore, a little fun idea.
We are, yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, me too. But before we get there, I just want to remind folks we're in that time of the year where we're doing our shout out, our annual shout out for summer series. And if you kind of rewind the tape back to February of this year, normally we come back from summer, Ben, and we just say to people, hey, look, put a line in the sand and say, look, really dig in for the year
Yes.
and get your money smarts organised or buy your investment property or really work towards making a transformation. So what we're doing this year for summer series is we're conscious of the fact that people are in summer doing different things and they want different content to consume. 2 lanes. First one is if you've actually landed the plane, you might have been doing it for 20 years, you might have been doing it for 25 years. The longer the better, but that's not a filter to say I haven't been doing it for a long time, to don't put your hand up. But let us know what you've done and how you've done it and how you're enjoying the lifestyle.
And we want to know the story around what you paid for it and what's it worth today and how much has the rent moved up over that time and when did it go from maybe negatively geared to positively geared? Like that's the story, right? Because this is the stuff we say happens over the decades. It doesn't happen over the minutes or seconds. It happens over a long period of time.
It's like I think about the property. The oldest property I've got in my portfolio was back in 2002, and I paid 191.5, and it's laughable now. Absolutely laughable.
I've done the same thing. I went back on the More platform and I put the original rent that I got for the Copeland Street property in Sydney.
Yeah.
And I've seen all of the rent increases, from like I think the original rent I was getting was like $23,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
And now it's up to almost $50,000 a year.
Yeah, wow. So 23. What are we talking about? $500 a week?
The yield was about. I remember. I think from memory it was around 4.8, 4.9%.
Yeah,
Obviously
right.
the property was $395 at the time. It's now circa 1.7.
Yeah.
So but it's just that's what we're trying to teach. That's going to happen. And when I see it on my More graph and all that, I go, okay.
Because the hardest part for people who haven't been investing for 30 years is to sort of get your head around.
Believe it.
I'm going to buy a $700,000 property now, and at some point in the future, it's going to be over $4 million. Like,
correct.
It's so that's
It's hard to compute.
So if that's you, we would definitely love to hear from you. And also, we're trying to provide an outlet for those folks who, if they've been burnt by a property experience, what happens is they retreat and they suffer in silence. And what we've experienced when we've been chatting to people over the journey, on camera and off camera, is just the getting it off their chest is a really cathartic experience, and a problem shared is a problem halved. So we want to help people who may have experienced a negative process and they want to come and chat and what that looks like. So if that's you, and if you've got a feeling in your stomach, I often say that is the sign that you should reach out. On both of those lanes. But if you fall into the latter and you're feeling maybe a little bit of shame or some other sort of unresourceful emotions around that, just know that we're going to take great care of you. We want you to come and share your story and be of great service to other people. And hopefully Ben and I can offer you some insights and some encouragement and a path ahead in the journey. So if that's you, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/my story. And we would love to hear from you, Ben. And we're in that season, Ben, around property and people are out. So we've got some free reports that we want to talk about.
Yeah, we do. I mean, ultimately, it's the spring selling season. We're almost 1 month in. It's obviously a pretty active time. Certainly have seen a lot of price pressure. So it is a rising tide lifting all ships. So if you are thinking about entering the market, now's not a bad time to be getting one of our free reports, or a couple of them for that matter. So just go to thepropertycouch.com.au/free report, and you'll be able to get access to those free reports.
Yeah, very good. And folks, it's just not stuff that's been made up on the internet that you can get and scrape. There's some algorithms, there's some data, there's some
demand supply scores, all of those sorts of things.
You'll be surprised at how much. Just go and have a look. Trust me on that one. It is not just something that you can make up on the internet. So
no.
Hey, my mindset minute theme today, Ben, is I'm thinking about we're doing FOMO to COMO today. We'll explain what that looks like. Yep. I've got my little black book from my Warren Buffett quotes that Jasper gave to me, right? So I've had a look at this one, and I'm trying to think, does this fall into the theme of today? But Warren said this: most people get interested in stocks when everyone else is. The time to get interested in is when no one else is. You can't buy what is popular and do well. And the reason I thought that might be something that we could talk about today, because we are talking about trying to help people get into a market that is popular. And particularly in big cities, it's expensive. And so you might need to look a little bit outside the square. And I guess that's what the sentiment of what Warren was saying there is, that, it's easy to ski downhill. You need to be able to zig when others are zagging. And
so there's an art form to obviously the investment strategy he talks about, which is effectively value investing. So when he sees value, which is when other people are fearful, he gets in. When he sees, excess and irrational exuberance, he's trading that value because he's already bought into those particular markets. But yeah, certainly when I look around all the Australian markets at the moment, is there a lot of value? Well, it's a rising tide lifting all ships story. So, how far this particular price movement runs. But what we don't want to do is, using your downhill skiing analogy, is get in front of our skis. Normally, if you lean forward too far, you can potentially get hurt. And we are definitely seeing a lot of irrational exuberance in that entry-level side of the market at the moment. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. And we're seeing a lot of buyers agents and all of that sort of hyperbole it up. So, it's an interesting time.
All right. As an introduction to today's episode, Ben, I just want to talk to this here. Have you noticed that the conversation around property has shifted? Not long ago, it was all about FOMO, i.e. the fear of missing out. People were racing into the market, desperate not to miss the boom. But today, it's not FOMO, it's COMO. And of course, COMO, Ben, means
is compromise, Bryce, or miss out.
Compromise or miss out. So we've got FOMO, we've had FOPO, we've now got COMO, which is the compromise or miss out. So we want to talk about a story. We're going to put it in the show notes that was aired on SBS. So we'll obviously put that in so you can check the link. And you've recently featured it on What's Making Property News.
Yeah, a few weeks back we had a bit of a chat about it in terms of, I thought, actually there's more here to be talked about in terms of what are some of the ways in which I can compromise as opposed to missing out, or think that, it's beyond me, right? The great Australian dream beyond me? Well, we're going to give you a couple of ideas about how you can potentially still get on the property ladder and not compromise.
Well, the great Australian dream is still available to people who are prepared to do something that's either bank of mum and dad, inheritance, or do something that other people aren't prepared to do. So in that article, Tim was 31. He was a digital marketing professional on a 6-figure income, no debt, even owns an investment property. And on paper, he was doing everything right. But living in Sydney, which is a tough city to try and break into, paying nearly $600 a week in rent, almost 40 grand a year, he felt like he was running on a treadmill, earning good money, but never actually getting ahead. So what did he do? He packed up and left Sydney, moving almost 600 kilometres inland to the tiny town of, I don't even know if I could say this properly, Ben, Barcaldine. I've butchered that in central Queensland.
Good attempt.
Barcaldine is the only other one I was going to have a swing at. He calls it his financial gap year, right? So here's a case of compromise or miss out, Ben. Yep. His new job on a cattle station came with accommodation, so his rent, gone. His expenses down 75 to 80%. No rent, expenses down 75 to 80%. So last month, his only major cost was $220 on groceries. But here's the kicker. With his savings rate supercharged, he's now on track to bank around $100,000 in a single year.
Tick.
And he's already mapped out what comes next. He plans to buy a small hobby farm in regional Queensland, something he would never been able to afford if he'd stayed stuck in the Sydney rental trap. Now, there's a spin on that. It's not for everyone to do that, but it was for Tim.
Yes, agreed.
Now, that's not the forever home, but that's not the forever location. But the decision, compromising on location, completely changes his financial trajectory. And that's what today's episode is about. So in this market, if you're trying to buy a property, you are definitely going to face compromises.
You have
unless you are blessed with a unlimited budget.
I don't think that anyone who bought a house in the 1960s wouldn't say they had to compromise or the 70s or 80s, but there's no doubt that compromise has to come into play.
Yeah, so, affordability ceilings, borrowing limits, tight supply means you can't have it all, right? So we're going to give you, at the end of this episode, clear idea of how you can shift from the frustration of waiting for the perfect home to actually taking steps to get you into the market, build wealth, and moving you closer to your goals. So stick around, folks. We're going to give you 8 ways that we've come up. Not an exhaustive list, Ben. It's not the only list.
No. I'm sure people could add to that, put it in the comments, share it with us on socials in terms of some other ideas of ways in which you can save or get into the property market.
Well said. So we're gonna do that. But before we get there, Ben, we're going to revisit one of our earlier episodes, the buyer's decision quadrant. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah. So what we're talking about here with the buyer's decision quadrant, it's in our new book, and it's in our first book as well, that there's 4 quadrants, naturally, 4 areas: price, location, land size, and dwelling type quality, right? So we believe, in terms of all of the work we've done in terms of talking to clients and understanding their needs, in some area here, you will have to compromise, right? There's not really anything such as the perfect home that we can all afford, right? Like if we all want to live in Point Piper, that's a dream, but none of us can afford it, so it's not a reality. So we have to think about that. So let me start. I'll unpack the first one, which is price. So effectively, this is one of the biggest ones, right? We usually hit a ceiling when it comes to our budgets. So when we're hitting that ceiling in coming to our budget, we've got to say, okay, well, that's can I compromise on price?
For most people,
really, for not me. Yeah. So let's move on to the second in the
quadrant.
Well,
the only space that I see it for people to compromise on price is they've said, I've got a borrowing capacity of 1.1, but I only want to go to 900. So that's for most people, that's your only wriggle room on price. Because for us,
but what do we know about that usual outcome?
Well, they'll get there anyway.
they'll condition themselves after they start their own research. They'll move up on price. Yeah. But it's a fair one. And if you are disciplined and you can stay to a budget, then maybe you don't have to compromise on price. The second one is in terms of location. So location for us is around, it obviously has a direct correlation to price because some locations are more expensive than others. So you've got to start thinking to yourself, do I have to move out further where affordability becomes the mainstay in terms of, as I start doing my research, do I start to think about location? And so usually people have aspirations on location. And so we find that from dealing with thousands of clients that we do, that some aren't willing to move on location because they want the lifestyle drivers, the amenity, potentially the status, but also comes with living in those nicer pockets. Maybe they're also interested in crime rates, schools, those other things. So they're thinking more medium to longer term about the livability of that location. So maybe that's a harder thing to move from. And then so the next one, Bryce, is what we talk about in terms of what bang for a buck of land do I get when I'm thinking about the buyer's decision quadrant.
Yeah, because it's if you're fixed on price and location does 80% of the heavy lifting, it really normally comes down to these two. Not always, but normally comes down to these two. Are you going to compromise the size of the land, or are you going to compromise the quality of the dwelling? And it really comes down to, if it's, let's go owner occupier first here. It really comes down to what your ego will allow you to have, isn't it? Because if you want to get onto the property market and you're wanting, if you're wired in a way that means that you need to impress people, you're going to go shiny and lower land size before you go higher land size over renovate or detonate. And really you have to do a deal with your ego to work out which one of those two really matters most. And clearly for us, the higher land size you get, the better, not only for your lifestyle needs but your investment.
Well, technically, from a sort of the idea around future productive use of that land and margin of safety, if I'm wearing sort of this hat that I want to get a return, but I'm still an owner occupier. So what will happen there is, especially if you're in a relationship, is when you talk about the price that the ego will afford. If I go out to a new estate and I can walk through those new housing estates and see effectively. I can visualize myself living in a brand new home and it's got the beautiful kitchen and open area and al fresco area. All of a sudden, I can start to have these relationships with how I'll entertain and the memories that I'll create. And the further I go out, the cheaper the land, not so much the cheaper the construction, because the construction is whether I build that closer in or whether I build that out, it's sort of almost a fixed cost. So, if you get emotionally attached to that story, you're going out there thinking that, I'm going to have all of these great memories that are created. The interesting bit of feedback that we see from a psychology point of view is that if people have been living closer in and they like the dynamics of the inner city area and they go out, but all their friends have compromised on the bigger house and gone for the townhouse or gone for the flat or the villa, those friends don't come out as often. Right? And so they feel isolated out in those outer suburbs. So this comes back to that point. That it's real. And so, they might stay out there for a year and a half, 2 years, but they're just not, if they are real social creatures, they'll want to come back in, right? If you're a homebody and you don't like that and you get that through your work, then, you might satisfy that hunger of, that human psychology of connection. But that's what happens when we are talking to clients. It's like, okay, how much value do you put on, that beautiful home and the status that it brings you, but if no one's coming to have the dinner parties with you because you're 45 kilometres from the city and, they just prefer to be around you and, it doesn't matter if you're in a round table in a villa, two better at that time, that also plays into it. And then obviously growing out, if you've got a growing family, you got to think about the number of bedrooms and all those types of things that come into play as well.
Yeah, so there you have it, folks. It's just a revisit of a fundamental framework. We've written about it in both of our books, and we think when you're going to search for a property, whether it's an investor or an owner-occupier, that framework's going to and doing the work on that framework before you start going out is really where the magic lives, because trying to do that on the run when the heart gets invested is a challenge. But folks, that's assuming that you can actually get on the property ladder. Some people might be listening, they go, oh, that's nice that you get to compromise on at least one of those four areas. We can't even get in in the first place. So that's really what we want to talk about today. We've revisited the framework, and part of that is the strategies that we're going to talk to you about will address which area that you're compromising on. But before we get there, so how can you apply the fear of or the compromise or miss out smartly, right? So there's a few things. One is getting clear on what it is that you want. Rank your priorities. And if you think about, we set it up with Tim's idea earlier. Tim's priorities wasn't to try and find another part of Sydney. Tim's priorities was to actually go and be somewhere else in the country that gave him the best opportunity of saving that big cash balance that allowed him to move forward. So sometimes it's about being strategic first. It's not like which suburb do I want to be in. It's actually, does Sydney serve me? Am I better off being in Adelaide? Do I have family that are interstate and I've moved away? And the fact that I've moved away is making it more difficult for me. Like being super clear on, we sort of call it North Star, your vision, your strategy, whatever you want to call it. Getting that up front is super important. You need to put some work in that before you start getting in the arena.
Yeah, and I'll bring a really practical way of looking at this is, Jane would know when I was a lot younger, and I am a social creature, as you know. I obviously feed off other people. If I hadn't seen anyone on the weekend and my mates and something like that, I was a little bit grumpy come Sunday night. And so the reality for us is that we wanted to be and needed to be close to that, because if I'm not going to have happiness, so I might have a nice home, it might be out in the burbs, yeah, but it's not necessarily filling my bucket from an emotional and connection point of view. So I've got to be thinking about that. And so that's there's a fair bit of slow thinking in that, because a lot of people, to the point I made earlier, if they don't think about that and they just think, well, we'll go and buy and we'll get started in our life out in the burbs, but they've got disconnect with family, that's going to affect them. And property has a lot of entry costs and the exit costs on both ends. So I really like that one first. Number one is to rank your priorities and start thinking about what's important to you.
And then number two is, okay, well, how much can I afford? Like, go back to that first part of the quadrant in terms of price. What is my borrowing power, and what is my trap surplus, and what have I got left over? Because if we start with what we want and then we start from where we are, then we can start to get a better idea of where do I need to be, and which part do I need to compromise on, and which of the strategies that we're going to offer up as suggestions that you might need to even consider.
Yeah, and I think that flows well into point number 3, which is, if that is my budget, and we saw Tim, he's gone and said, I need a bigger budget, I need a bigger deposit to get into the areas that I want to get into, so I'm going to go off and save that, so I can potentially come back into the Sydney market with a realistic deposit that might get me, closer to the central business district or closer to where I want to live with the type of property that I want to potentially re-enter the market into as well, is definitely going to be something like that. So that's when you can start exploring creative ways. And what was Tim's creative way, in terms of getting out there? Well, he went and said, I'm going to go and earn an income, but completely, remove my need for paying rent. And so every dollar I'm then saving, and if I put myself out in a regional town, I've got no temptations to go to the movies or to go down to the pub and drop $250 on a night out. All of those things are gone. So I think if you can think, and we've got a couple of creative ways, we're going to get to those in a minute, but I think, point number 3 there is explore those creative ways and think outside of the square.
Yeah, and let's play devil's advocate, because the first two, get clear on my priorities, determine what my borrowing capacity is and my cash flow, universal, right? But it's third decision that you just said is actually fork in the road, because you can actually go and, to your point, think of creative ways to get in, or what seems to be the most common treaded path is to then get into the poor me narrative, which is property is, you property investors are making it hard for us. We're never going to get in. The younger generation, like you and I personally know so many young people who've got in. So it's actually just not fact. And that's the message. It's actually not fact that you can't get in. Is it difficult? Yeah. Is the deposit saving hard? Yep. Is it impossible to get? No, it's not. And so that's really what we want to say here is there will come a point in time in the future, like when you're in parts of Europe, where it is just impossible to get into the property market. But that's not the case in Australia yet. We are moving towards that, but it's not the case yet.
I mean, if you were to summarize or define the word compromise, what we're basically saying is, what are you prepared to sacrifice? And when do you want to do your hard? Yeah, as part of that story.
It's a good point. Effort and sacrifice, and they're not the same. Sacrifice is, what do I have to give up that I like doing? No, effort is what I have to give up that I like doing, and what the sacrifice is, what do I have to do that I don't like?
Yeah, and because you're right. I mean, in some cases, I might still have to give up the frequency of the things that I really love doing, because that could be another portion. Because if you can't still get there, but you keep all your non-negotiables, well, then you're not thinking hard enough and you're not making enough sacrifice. So if travel and experiences bring you great joy, but the reality is you only can do them 2 times a year or 1 time a year for a couple of years versus the 4 or 5 times a year that you were doing it, that's another piece of the equation that you've got to be thinking.
Yeah, we're just blessed in this country to have such an amazing lifestyle, but it comes with the flip side. It's expensive to live here. So rank your priorities. Yep. Get a clear picture of your borrowing capacity, your cash flow. Open your mind. And again, we're talking to people who can't get onto the market, so they've got to compromise or miss out. Open your mind to exploring alternate pathways. And I guess then get to work. Just decide which one that you actually want to do.
Well, I think if the reward is worth the effort, and what we are talking about here is the long-term outcome of the lifestyle by design you're trying to create, if that moves the dial enough for you, then go after it. get on after it. What we are, to your point, Bryce, what we're seeing in some areas of society where that effort and that hard, brings excuses or brings denial, and then later in life they're going to regret that. And in fact, I've got some data in What's Making Property News that sort of supports what we're saying here about. So I'll give a little bit of a way of it now, but one of the greatest regrets for people about getting on the property market is that they didn't get on sooner. And so it's about making those compromises.
Well, for most people, there is there's regret around not getting in at all if they don't. And then if they do, it's not getting in sooner, right? Because we've talked about this so many times in our podcast, but for those who are new to it, it is a world of hurt in retirement if you don't have the basic need of a roof over your head. So we understand that there's alternates. You can go and put your money into ETFs, for example, and you might have a cracking ETF portfolio by the time you retire, but that ETF portfolio is not going to give you.
Our economy and our society and our governance around all of that is preferential to the family home. Now, there will be some tweaking to that, I suspect, over the next 30 to 50 years, but still the fundamental reward and financial security comes in owning property.
All right, we're going to talk about 8 practical ways to compromise. The first one we're going to call hustle and restraint. Now, what this means is that you are going to go, all right, I live in Melbourne, I live in Adelaide, I live in Brisbane, Sydney. I am actually going to do my job, and I am actually going to get a side hustle. And the side hustle is going to last as long as it takes for me to achieve the goal. So we've got examples of this. We had Harley on our podcast. He worked 2 jobs, 70 hours a week, no silver spoon. You can go and check that episode out. And basically, he just said, I am going to so let's talk to those people. You have to get your ego in check because you aren't going to burn money on weekends out. You're going to be working long hours. But if you do it well, you can actually strategically plan catch-ups. You can strategically plan going overseas on a shoestring and keeping the eye on the prize by going, I'm working 2 jobs and I'm only doing this for as long as it takes for me to get in. Because once he did that, it then became a snowball effect for him.
Well, look, I mean, I've got a lived example for my father who 3 jobs for 37 years. Now, when he first bought our home in Bundoora, 1970, he put a deposit down for the piece of land. In 1971, the house was built, A.V. Jennings' home. He was working his main job at Ansett, but also a cleaning job, and then picked up a second cleaning job and did some, ad hoc weekend. But did he still do multiple trips to Asia and, do all the travel stuff that he loved and the perks that he got from working in an airline? Yes, he did. So that's nothing new. We're going back there, 50 odd years. So I really think it's really important for people to say, well, Uber driving or whatever it is that I'm going to find to get that second income, to get a deposit up and fast track myself to my first property makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, well, it's normal to us, isn't it? Because same in my house. Dad bought his property back in, we bought the land in 1986, built the house, we moved in 1987, and he paid off the mortgage in 7 years. And he was working Saturdays. I didn't see Dad during that time. That was during the recession we had to have. So it wasn't like there wasn't any adversity that he had to overcome.
Very high interest rates, 19%.
Yeah,
interest rates.
And we were definitely middle Australia. We were probably, if we were being honest, we're probably the lower end of middle Australia too. And to the point where my sister, when she first met my brother-in-law, when it was boyfriend at the time, they were going out for dinner, and that was foreign to me. Like we got the occasional Hungry Jacks.
We never went out. Maybe we had a can of meal over summer. But the pub at Yarrawonga at the terminus or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not something that we're saying, oh, that's nice for you two on the ivory tower to actually suggest. Yeah. Like we've lived and breathed it.
Fish and chips on Thursday night. That was probably our luxury, right?
True. Yeah. And watch the Henderson Kids on Friday night. Yeah. That'll go over the head of most people. But so the first one we think is the obvious one, which is the hustle and constraint. But what are you compromising on? You're compromising on your lifestyle and your free time. Yeah. And I guess you get to you manufacture your affordability through just a bit of hustle, a bit of discipline, and
you bring forward. You're bringing forward that opportunity.
Yeah. So it's easier than ever to get a side hustle. I mean, when you're driving to work, just pick up a few people on the way in and then pick up a few people on the way out and do some stuff on the weekend.
Tasking,
There's just
Uber driving.
that just didn't exist back when we were doing it, right?
Selling some of your, stuff you use.
Yeah, find some arbitrage on doing that. We're in an AI pivot where if you go and learn how to understand AI and help people, the dinosaurs like us,
100%.
Far out.
Yep,
So it is never. So hustle and restraint. What about the second one, Ben?
Yeah, number 2 is rent vesting. Obviously, this has become if I had said it was a real niche when we first, and let's credit to Chris Gray. I think he was the one who coined rent vesting, but we did
I've been doing it
since articles.
Since my first rent vest was 1999.
Yeah, there you go. And we did the article for Money Magazine at the time where we analysed, the value of rent vesting versus, which effectively is live where you want to live and then ultimately trap that surplus and put it to work, right? But I think now that's even evolved a little bit more where people are also still compromising on where they're living. Like they're still trying to be budget conscious, but they're still trying to get on the property ladder. And so we're seeing a lot of this through the next generation of buyers agents who are teaching people to try and buy 2 or 3 affordable properties really quickly and get a quick win on those and start trading property. Now that's not the rent vesting that, and that's not the value investing that we believe in, but we can understand why there's tactics in that, but there's also self-interest for those buyers agents. They get to buy multiple properties and charge multiple fees. Brokers get to obviously do multiple loans. So it's definitely a different way of thinking about how rent vesting plays itself out. But it's a thing and it's an opportunity, right?
I guess to your point too, like we're not trying to say rent vest to build a big massive portfolio. We're saying rent vest to get into the market where you want to go. So let's circle back. You're spending big rent in Sydney. You can't afford to get into Sydney, but you can afford to buy something in a regional town that stacks up, right? Commutable regional town. Yep. And then you move into a bit of hustle and restraint as well. So you cross those over, and then you ideally would hold that property, but you may have to trade out of it to get the deposit to then buy where you want to be and get on the ladder closer to where you want to do. So remember the context of what we're discussing here is not to get into rent vesting for big portfolio. It's rent vesting to get you into compromise so that then you get into where you want to go.
And I think, with the rising tide lifting all ships at the moment and this hustle that's going on in that space, that there might be a false dawn here around that there's easy gains to be made. Like the reality is if too many first-home buyers get locked out of this market, politically it's going to be challenging. And so we'd expect regulation might come in and sort of swathe problem of these quick gains. So we support rent vesting. We think it's, but it's not for everyone, but it's definitely another opportunity.
Okay, the next one we want to talk about is downsizing your expectations. So let's imagine you're a young family, you've been living with mum and dad so you can save a deposit, you've been doing really, really well, and you have aspiration for a big block, a house on a big block so that your kids can run around. Great. But what compromise might you need to consider there? Well, clearly, if you go back to our framework of size of the land, quality of the dwelling, it's definitely one of those two. So what we're suggesting here for those folks is instead of buying a house, which is the preference, we know, and it's what we preach on the podcast, you might go and find something that is, to use our term, investment worthiness, investment grade. So a townhouse or a villa unit, and by villa we mean maybe a shared driveway. It's got its own land. Yep. So that you can actually still give your kids or your family that opportunity to have your own space, particularly if you're currently on some form of compromise to save your deposit by living still back at home with mum and dad or whatever. But get in closer, get your townhouse, and then just really start to go back to hustle and restraint so that you can build the equity, power down some loan, and then either use it as a springboard to buy what you want, or again trading through that to get your deposit, so that you move onto the bigger house and land.
So come back to your non-negotiable. If your non-negotiable is I want to be close to the action and we really love that, then the compromise is absolutely on type of dwelling, no doubt, because we're not compromising on the land. So let's start to think about that. And then to your point, if we get into a property that might be, a townhouse that might have been built in 70s or 80s, or a villa that might have been built in the 60s, jump into that. And if it's in original condition, potentially a bit of sprucing as well as, as well as slamming the debt. especially before kids. I mean, the kids bring a different variable because you've got other things to think about. You've got to think about schooling, resources, daycare, all of the other resources around that area, availability of schooling, quality of schools, all those types of things. But I think if you're young and you're thinking about getting into the market, get in before you're 5 or 7 years before you're thinking about family. You will be really well set up if
you're agile. You're at that point. There's the agility that you lose when you're trying to do it with family. So, okay. So first one's hustle and restraint. Second one's rentvesting. Third one is downsizing your expectations so you can get in. Another area that people can compromise, Ben, is by teaming up, have some form of co-ownership with ideally blood, but well, actually that's a big statement.
I think it's a reasonable statement.
Yeah, assuming harmony.
Yes, assuming harmony. I think that would be. It's a lot safer, and I think you'll get a lot more buy-in from your parents if it is blood related. Agreed. I mean, the risk we know with friends is you've got to have a contract, and you've got to be really clear on what that contract is, because if you're going to be starting out and you think that this is people's situations aren't going to change, or their interests aren't going to change over a 10-year period, you're wrong. So you've got to have, in my mind, a minimum of a 5-year commitment. And there's got to be some hurt in terms of if one of them wants to cash out, they're going to lose the gain and the other party gets to cash in that gain.
That's the point, isn't it? Having some form of restraint that creates a disincentive to break, because everyone's excited. We all want to get on the ladder. And the thing with people living under the same roof is it works best when you've got the same agenda. And so when you even siblings don't have the same life agenda, friends have an agenda that matches at the time of entry, but over time that agenda can part. But look, the reason it's so good is you can pull your deposit. Like if that's the hard bit, and we acknowledge that maybe our grandparents, because affordability has been hard over the generations, we've said that before, but it's the deposit raising which is the challenge.
Absolutely.
So if you can pull the deposits and buy together, you will compromise on full control. You will compromise on independence. However, you'll get a fast track into the market, hopefully a better location. Therefore, as a result, maybe 1 or 2% better growth than if you had gone on your loan. And at some point in time when you need to part ways, ideally it's a principal place of residence for the both of you, and you move on.
It's all commercial. So let me just explain. So yes, advantages are really strong around double deposit. So that means less debt. These days with loans, you can actually do split loans through your broker, and that will allow you to track the portion that you're paying down. So it's nice and clean there. You could have both of you initially say, we're going to both move in. We're going to save on rent. So that's a pro as well. But then maybe what if you did partner up? Well, your partner's feeling like they want their own space. So you get to move out. And that's true. The other person is still on a commercial rent. So it's a commercial rent for them. And if they want the place exclusively themselves, they're still paying the commercial rent. And that goes into a pool. So it's really easy to basically do the numbers around that. So if it's just all done commercially and everyone knows what the rules of engagement are, you're going to get a good result.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so that was co-ownership with friends or siblings at number 4. Next one we're going to talk about is what we're going to call house hacking. So what does that mean? Well, buying a house that has an alternate way for you to earn an income, right? So think about a granny flat, or maybe if you're after a 2-bedroom house and you get a 3-bedroom house, which increases the commitment, but you can rent out a room to someone else. So largely thinking, okay, how am I going to afford this by sharing it with other people who aren't co-ownership like the first one, but they are co-existence, they're co-tenanting, and they will help you with the cash flow around that.
Yeah, what's another example? So if I am closer in and I might have bought a 2-bedroom apartment in a small block and I've got a car park on title, but I'm so close to the amenity and
I don't have a car.
I'm a cycler and I don't have a cyclist and I don't have a car. So maybe I lease out my car spot because, car parking, all of those types of things are quite expensive these days. So that's another way of thinking outside the square, which is adding value to your property. Also, if you're going away for periods of time for work, what do? You put it on the short term, Airbnb, maybe, or Airbnb your room to that point you were saying before.
Well, it's like we go away to to Perth regular. You know, we got
Yep.
this,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and I got the same thing where we've got split families over the Nullarbor. But if you're living in a location that allows you to, you know, take advantage of that, now,
Rent it over summer.
yeah, the compromise comes from having other people in your place and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, which I don't personally love, but I'm not trying to compromise or miss out here.
Yeah,
And
that's right. This sacrifice.
yes,
Yeah, it's about the judgment on sacrifice.
100%. So you will compromise on privacy, lifestyle, and part of your principal place of residence exemption will be compromised too if you turn your house into an income producing asset. So you need to
That's
be
the trade-off.
you need to be aware of that. But look, we're looking for creative ways for people to get on, just to reiterate that we are not in a position where it's impossible for young people or people who are trying to get on the property ladder to get on, but at some point in the future it will be. So it's time to
And those international students, you know, to that point around compromise on the principal place of residence exemption, there is, read up on this, but there is an opportunity to have them, you know, sort of boarding, and like that just helps out with the utility bills. You know what I mean? Like, because, you know, when you're running an air conditioner or you're running heating, it's benefiting the whole house. So if you can get $10 or $20 for that, which is covering their cost, but that's going into your back pocket, means that you're not necessarily paying that. So I like that one there. So that was house hacking. And obviously then we move on to number 6, which is the regional hub relocation. And so what we're talking about here is not just necessarily moving right to the outback like Tim did, but we are sort of talking about, well, you know, if rents are 30% cheaper in a commutable area, and or my job, I can even do my job in that regional town and still probably potentially earn 20%. Well, let's say the premium I get for the job that I do in town has a 30% premium, right? But let's say that the rent in those reasonable commutable areas is at a 30% deduction from the premium that I'm paying in town. But what if I moved my job, or I work from home or whatever, or I got a local job there and I only compromised 10% on wages or 15% on wages, but I got another 15% uplift in terms of the cheaper rent that I've got to pay. So there's definitely those types of opportunities in terms of people getting out of their comfort zone and having a look at that as a possibility.
Yeah, so to your point, so what about Bendigo or Ballarat or Sunshine Coast or
Wollongong,
Newcastle?
Yep.
And I guess for anyone who's living in Victoria, we're actually quite blessed here, because from north to south in the state is actually like you think about from north to south in Western Australia, north to south in Queensland, even South Australia, like to go to Bendigo or Ballarat or Albury, it's not like you're schlepping it a long way to get back to the big smoke if you ever need a big smoke. So the compromise to some of these towns in Victoria is probably easier than like Orange, but that's expensive in New South Wales. You go to some of the...
Correct, but also those are really like, they're still in the top 50 population centres, but the industry and the job opportunities there are a little more limited. Whereas when you're talking about the larger commutables, they're a thriving economy within their own right, and that's probably what you also need to be thinking.
Yeah, and then when you want to do a U-turn and come back, so we're talking about compromising or missing out. So if you go to Bendigo, which is what is it, 3 hour?
Hour and a half.
Well, it's 3 hours from my house, so it's
Hour and a half.
Yep. It's not like at some point in time when you've built up equity and you've saved and hustled and coming back to Melbourne, it's not like you're moving from Perth to Melbourne. It's
there's no container shipments and all of the big sort of extra costs associated with that. So I think that one is the one where, you know, those people who are really willing, that this is so important to them, home ownership is really important to them, that I would start to think about those regional and treat it like a medium term, you know, experiment. And you're going out there and living in a new location, and, you know, it's just a freshen up for a couple of years, and then potentially look to come back in.
And Ballarat, for example, is an hour and 15. So like I live an hour and 15 from Melbourne, and I'm in regional Victoria. Like some people commute from a mate's place on the far east of Melbourne to the far.
If I'm going to a dinner party down at Port, down in Frankfurt from Moonee Ponds, I'm an hour and 15 in traffic.
I know. So it's not like you're disconnecting from your lifestyle. You can still stay connected to your mates and your networks and your jobs and all that sort of thing. So that's why I think Victorians are more blessed than others in terms of just that, the geography of Victoria to be enable them to do that. Hey, so that was what we're calling regional hub relocation. Next one, Ben, that you want to talk to is the ugly duckling.
Yeah, I mean, we have it as one of our strategies, our 17 strategies in the book. And it's really important to understand that how, location, right? So if I want to get into those locations, I've got to compromise on the quality or the condition of the asset. So how much am I willing to compromise? Because if I can buy where the land to asset ratio is in my favor and I can improve the condition of that property to modernize it a bit over 2 or 3 years, mate, that to me is a no-brainer. Like, if people are coming to us and doing planning and I say, what's the easiest strategy? Well, I'd still like you to buy in a better location and I'd like you to buy the worst house in the best street. Like, that is 101 property that's been taught to anyone. Any real estate agent will tell you that that's how you get get an accelerated result if you can buy the ugly ducklings and turn them into black swans.
Agreed. So that was number 7, ugly duckling. The last one. This is a good one for a lot of people. We're calling it the caretaking or house sitting arrangement. But there is a ton of people who are doing this, and it is people that are going away. They might have pets. They want to make sure the security's okay. It's surprisingly how often and how common this is, where you can go and they're the people who are letting your house sit are happy to pick the utility bills or make a small contribution. It is almost the same cost reduction ratio that we talked about with Tim on that article on SBS, where he's gone out and dropped expenses by such a dramatic amount. No rent, look after some pets, and drop your expenses.
There is an app for this sort of. There's several apps for this, but also, what if you put on Facebook or Insta? Because where I think this is a big sleeper opportunity is most of the baby boomers who are now getting access to their super, they're off to Europe for 3 months. And I know when we've got a dog, and so when we want to travel for a long period of time, like if you can bring someone and they have a staycation, and you throw that through your network. And I get a month here or 2 months there, and I can then also maybe get back into my parents' property because that's the obvious one that people move back home. But if I can then go and do that staycation or look after a dog or whatever for 2 or 3 months, I'm saving everything, and I'm also in a nice home potentially, and I've got a little bit of freedom now. Got to be responsible about it. We want can't have big parties or do anything stupid like that. But if you're a responsible young person who is reliable in terms of I'd let you live in my house for 3 months, and because what happens if the water thing breaks?
Yeah.
Like I come home and basically the whole house is flooded and it's been flooded for 3. Like it's ruined. The joint is ruined because we've got major flooding that goes on, and I'd prefer to have someone in the home if I'm going away from.
Agreed. And so and here people need to play into their strengths. If you present well, if you're clean and neat and tidy.
Well, through your own network, you'll know these trustable and reliable people versus the ones you wouldn't trust. You just need to look at their social media feeds and are they out on a Friday night till stupid o'clock or whatever? Well, we're not going to. Maybe they're not the mature ones that we want to get in.
That's how you make it a weapon. You make it a no-brainer for other people to say yes to you. You have you got references. You have demonstrated you're clean and tidy. Ideally, non-smoker, and again,
be respectful of the asset that you're moving into.
Correct.
And then you'll get a reputation up as being one of those people, and then you'll start getting job opportunities to go. That is a great way to save.
I think it's a wonderful way because you're getting it on both sides. You're minimising your expenses. You're trading old school labour to look after a dog and feed the dog in order to have a roof over your head, and your bank balance is swelling as a result. And then given these secondments are usually short term, so you can gypsy around if that's your nature and you don't want to be stuck to one place and you want to see new adventures and try different things and see different parts of a city or even go interstate. That's amazing. So folks, if we bring it back to the context of what today was all about, was compromise or miss out. We've just gone through 8 examples, not exhaustive, but we'd love to hear from you. What have we missed? What have you done? How have you compromised? Can you send us a little note? We'd love to hear it. Go on social, send us a little direct message. Our team will get that to us, and let us know how we can pad that list out onto doing exactly what it is that you're doing. But I think the reframe here is really obvious. You don't need your forever home in your forever location right now. You just need a smart entry point. The game is, to our point before, the game is not having multiple choices of absolutely being able to be on the property ladder and you go, well, is it price, location, size of land or quality of the dwelling? No, it's actually how do I actually get in on the first place. So there's a couple of things there to...
Well, the secret here, Bryce, is that the market rewards those who act.
100%. Which compromise are you prepared to make so that you don't miss out? Which compromise are you prepared to do so that you don't miss out?
Might be a couple, and that's okay. But the delayed gratification, when you're up on top of the mountain and you're living your lifestyle by design, I reckon it's worth it.
There you go, folks. Make sure you reach out to us. We'd love to know on the ground what you are doing to buck the trend and say, if it's up to me, if it's to be, it's up to me. This is what I'm doing. All right, Ben, today my Life by Design hack is one of our team here, Patrick, sent this to me, and it's Catalyst Climbing is the YouTube channel. So we're going to definitely do the source. And have a little listen to the way that they break down a way to hack your inner critic.
Working with a friend of mine called John Robertson, who happens to also be a psychotherapist. He and I have worked on this drill together. I'm really excited to show all of you. If you're interested, we've put John's website just in the description, so you can have a look and book him if you'd like to. Very, very good recommendation. But yeah, today we're going to go through this drill, and I'm going to teach it to Sam, and we'll see how well it works. Okay, let's properly explain the mindset drill we're going to be using for today's session. We've created a scoring system to use when analysing your inner critic. 1 point for statements that are untrue and unhelpful. 5 points for statements that are true but unhelpful, and 10 points for statements that are true and helpful. To give some examples, a 1 point statement might be, that move was way too scary, there's no way I can do that. I would confidently say that's not true. Could you prove it in court level of true?
Okay.
If you don't have evidence, then you would have to say something like, it felt really scary. You wouldn't want me to say, you're never going to be able to do that. So I'd also say it's unhelpful.
Yep.
So if it's untrue and unhelpful, he gets 1 point. With a 5 point statement might be, that move felt really scary and I chose to come down. And I'll go, okay, that's true. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happened. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing that helpful there, though. So if the statement was true but not helpful, I'll give him 5 points. This is where we can start measuring our improvements in mindset.
Quantifying.
Yeah, quantifying it.
Nice.
And finally, for a 10-point statement. That move felt really scary and I can't change that. On my next go, I'm prepared to be brave and I'm going to try hard. And for that, I'd go, okay, that's true. That's exactly what happened. And that's a helpful thing to say.
Yeah.
And we're now gently trying to train his inner critic so that, ideally, with practice, it does take practice,
Yeah, about.
the first thing Sam thinks after he falls or whatever happens on a climb is that 10-point version. That would be the goal long term, but I'm not expecting that to be that quick. It will take us some practice.
Yep.
How's this sound so far?
Yeah, good.
Well, great. Let's do it then.
There you go, Ben. What I really loved about that, and I'm glad that it crossed my desk, is it's a muscle memory process of training your mind to go, the statement that I just made, how would I rate that with points? And for a lot of us, 1 points are our default. But if you can move up to 5 and then slowly get to the point where you are getting 10, it's a dopamine hit. It's gamifying your own mind in a way that you can go, oh, all right, is it true or false? And is it helpful or unhelpful? It's a pretty straightforward framework, and I thought it was useful for our listeners. If anyone's got those inner critics giving them a hard time, that's a good way for them to try and gamify it.
Yeah, I really like it because it builds on that useful belief, right? So through those positive reinforcements, helpful and encouraging and so forth. Well, they are in themselves useful because it gives you an open mind in terms of what you can achieve. So I really like it.
Very good. All right, Ben, what's making property news today?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. We're getting to obviously the end of the month, but next week, Bryce, the government's introduced their 5% deposit scheme. So they moved it forward from next year to the 1st of October. So now you can have a 5% deposit. Now, if you want to learn more about it, we've got information in the show notes, but it's sort of built on this report that was coming, that came out of the Great Southern Bank. And so they do this report that talks to, No Place Like Home report is what they call it. And they bring it out sort of every quarter. It's always an interesting little read. But what was interesting in here, the recent report from the bank revealed that 28% of homeowners consider their home as a source of income. But here's where it gets quite interesting. 58% of Gen Zs think that it's a source of income. So they have a real mindset that the property's meant to grow in value. and it's meant to be a wealth creation vehicle for me. So I think from that point of view, that's a really interesting thing in terms of now they've also gone 24% say they'd turn their home into an investment property is one of their intentions. 19% said they'd rent out a room, to our point earlier. So that's where they're being open-minded around that. And 16% said they'd run a business from their home. So these are all the hacks that we're talking about in terms of COMO. So the compromise that they're making, but they're thinking about their property as an asset, which I think is really interesting when you start to look at that. In terms of acceptance for a child living at a home for a longer period of time.
These are sobering for you and me to see how long our kids are going to stay.
41% of Australian parents said they'd let their child live at home so that's saving that deposit, 33%, then 2%. The older they are, the less they want them there. And 23% of parents said they're happy for their child to live with them forever, which is quite interesting. Like,
is that you, Ben?
No, I'm very clear on that. Like, ultimately,
I love my kids. They can stay with me as long as they like, as long as it's until they've got a two in there.
I'm teaching them how to fish, which means I'm teaching them how to live, and they've got to go out there and live in that big, beautiful. The world's competitive. They can't be sitting at home, basically living on that. Then one of the other interesting ones was around the unforeseen costs. So 35% saw real cost in getting the keys. 35% around unexpected, especially around insurances and all the other little things I didn't think about, utility bills. 20% said they need to renovate. 15% said they need to keep unkept. The upkeep
was more than expected. Yeah,
more than expected. 10% said they learn to learn some DIY skills because it's obviously costly to get trades and those types of things these days. And 8% said running out of room faster than expected. So that's where what we said earlier in the episode around if we are thinking about starting a family sooner rather than later, maybe a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment may not necessarily be something that you'll be staying in for 5 years. And we always think about should be a 5 to 7 year window when you're starting to think about property. So there's a couple of little infographics on that, but I thought we'll also share that report as well as part of that. So that's what's making property.
I like it, mate. So thank you for today. Hopefully we've given some insights into our community. If you are wanting to get on the property ladder, our invitation for you is to just say, if it's to be, it's up to me. What am I going to do to compromise so that I don't miss out? What am I going to do to take action? And again, just a shout out to those folks. If you're listening, you know someone. If you're listening, you've done it. Please let us know on our socials. Reach out via any one of our socials, or give us a note on SpeakPipe, whatever it takes on our website. We would love to accumulate real life stories of what people are actually doing, where they are compromising to make sure they don't miss out. But mate, it's always good. It's good to hang out in the studio here as well. Get the energy going between you and me.
Absolutely.
But until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce. But if you take a COMO approach to acting,
mate, we've been doing this for 10 years. I like it when you add some flavour to it. See you next week, folks.